Hello again. Time to join René and all the gang, the Jolly Boys Club in Normandy for René Me, Chapter 7.
René Me by George East. Read by Eugene Fraser.
March the 30th. The day of the international fishing competition dawns bright, cold and early, and Ronaldo and I report at the Café de Paris respectably late. Pierrot and Fredo await, and are dressed to kill in commando camouflage, balaclava helmets, freshly waxed moustaches, and huge knives dangling from ammunition belts stuffed with heavy-duty shotgun cartridges. They are obviously taking the match seriously, and may intend to shooting the fish if unable to hook them. As we walk to the car, I notice that each seems to be carrying at least 3 rods, and ask if others are joining us for the contest. Fredo explains carelessly that it's normal procedure for each competitor to have more than one hook in the water at the same time. In the car, the rules of the Grand Tournoi are laid down. The pond and our individual places around it will be decided by the committee, which is to be made up as host nation of Fredo and Pierrot. We will fish for 3 hours precisely, and the country with the biggest catch will obviously be declared champion. The loser, says Fredo, looking directly at me, will pay the fishing fee and for drinks at the Café de Paris afterwards. I consider lodging an official objection on the grounds that the French équipe will muster twice as many men and 6 times as many rods as the GB team. But remember my mother's claims about the odds at the Battle of Trafalgar, and keep my own counsel. After 10 minutes of careering along a bumpy track, we arrive on the shore of a magnificent lake at least half a mile across. Ignoring the parking facilities, Fredo drives on to a small clearing in a heavily wooded and secluded area. Here we find a square pond a little larger than a family-sized jacuzzi. Unloading the gear and provisions, Pierrot leads us to our positions. I am given the side underneath a huge beech tree, the branches of which brush my head as I stand and survey my pitch. Obviously our hosts are being considerate by allowing me the only place of shelter should it rain. Ronaldo is invited to take up his position nearby, while Fredo and Pierrot share the rest of the bank. Although they have 2 sides to our one, I notice that they place their rod holders very close together. We break out our kit, and I see that as well as 2 rods each, Fredo and Pierrot have fitted swivel traces, each with 2 sets of double hooks. The rods supplied for Ronaldo and I are much more modest affairs, and almost of the basic huckleberry fin patent. The maggots are doled out, and Fredo kindly sets our floats so that the hooks will hang no more than 6 inches beneath the water. This, he explains, is to avoid snagging on the roots of my tree, which apparently riddle the bed of the pond. I note that he and his colleague set their hooks at least a yard from the floats. After consultation, I and Ronaldo steal a march on our rivals and get our lines into the water without delay, while they are held up by the large amount of tackle and the baiting up of at least 24 maggots each. The competition proper starts, and the French floats disappear almost immediately. In 5 minutes, Fredo and Pierrot have taken a trio of fat trout between them. Ronaldo has struck once, and I decide that it's time to employ my English initiative in bending the rules a little. Although I am forbidden from moving my pitch, I may surely cast anywhere in the pond, and as a former B-League Portsmouth darts champion, I should be able to drop my sinker within a whisker of the French happy hunting ground. A quick and dexterous flick of the wrist, and my hook finds a branch of the giant beech. Fredo and Pierrot sympathize and break out the beer while issuing instructions on the best way to disentangle my line. Unfortunately, they add, they have no extra tackle with them. An hour passes, and the French contingent seem to have more fish in their binliner than could stand comfortably shoulder to shoulder in the tiny pond. Ronaldo has notched up a handful, and I'm halfway up the tree with my Swiss penknife. A little later, and a man appears carrying a dustbin on his shoulder. He shakes hands with Fredo and Pierrot, nods sympathetically to me, and discharges at least a gross of trout into the pond at the feet of his countrymen. The water boils as the fish compete to be the first on Norman hooks. the bin man disappears to fetch another load, while a queue of trout seem to be forming in a very un-French manner at the spot where Fredo and Pierrot are having difficulty in keeping up with demand. At the end of the allotted time, the tournament is declared over and the count begins. The French haul is 72. Ronaldo has managed a round half-dozen, and my total tally is 2 undernourished juveniles and 1 of Fredo's discarded beer bottles. Back at the Café de Paris, our host enlists the help of all the customers to carry his haul inside, where the giant, glittering, twisting mound is displayed on the bar top as he makes a lengthy address to the assembly. After a blow-by-blow account of the action, he announces the official figures for the competition and commiserates with the losers. Obviously, he says, it was harder for me, as I was in foreign waters. It is also well known that the British have lost the art of fishing, as is demonstrated by their morbid fear of French trawlers appearing in their waters. I respond graciously, toasting the success of the craftiest coarse anglers in the region. I also agree with Fredo about the rundown of our fishing fleet, and suggest that this is because we as a nation have been concentrating on efficient farming, which is why our exports of lamb seem to be doing so well in this part of France. All this badinage is taken in good spirit, especially, I suspect, as the drinks are now on me. The celebrations commence, and Fredo takes up a proprietary position at the door. For the rest of the morning he distributes largesse, trout, and the story of the international fishing tournament in equal measures to passing pensioners. As we leave, he takes me to one side and hands me a bag containing a dozen of his catch, with fondest compliments to Donella, and to ensure that we have enough to eat for lunch. March the 31st. Ronaldo and I have started on the treasure hunt. I have let my friend into the secret of the Grey Lady and the Miller's Gold, and he agrees it sounds very promising. Millers are also known as cheats and misers in Italy, and there's always a pot of gold near the casa. René is away on business with the widow of Negreville, so the coast is clear. We set to with a will at the base of the apple tree, and have hit some obstinate roots when our distant neighbour, Mr. Bellamy, arrives on his ancient khaki mobilette. Renowned in the neighbourhood as the only person who speaks a word of English, he gained his singular skills in 1944 after acquiring a booklet issued to all American GIs to help keep them on friendly terms with the natives. This makes for interesting conversation when he practices on me, and our first exchange began by his asking if we would take a bar of candy for a night's lodging in the barn we didn't have. His everyday patois is even more colloquial than René's, and makes normal conversation impossible, so we've agreed on a happy medium of sign language, wartime Americanese, and conventional French. Apparently believing we wish to move the old apple tree for some good old English reason to a point a metre from where it has stood happily since the Americans arrived, Mr. Bellamy joins us in the hole and shows us how to dig properly. An hour passes pleasantly, and the pile of earth beside the hole is approaching the size of the sand heap by the mill. It's probably my imagination, but the tree seems to be leaning towards us at more than the normal and accepted angle for orchards in this neck of the woods. So far, we've turned up some interesting old bottles and the remains of a giant horseshoe, but there's no sign of the Miller's Gold. By now, our good friend Marcel Barnard has also joined the party. The first person to arrive to welcome us to the area, Marcel lives in the same nearby hamlet as our mayor, and is the proud owner of an ancient lorry which he allegedly acquired from an enterprising supply sergeant when the American task force moved on in 1946. For as long as anyone can remember, he has hired himself and the lorry out for the odd haulage job, and in between contracts it makes a handy overnight coop for his free-range chickens. Driving past the farmhouse several years ago, Marcel had pulled over and watched in silent bewilderment as we started restoration work by removing at least a ton of vintage straw bales from the loft. As he explained later, they were the local equivalent of fiberglass lagging, and someone had taken a great deal of trouble to put them there in the first place to guarantee a comfortable winter. Seeing his empty lorry, we had asked how much he would charge to dispose of the bales, but he, good man that he is, had refused the commission. Instead, he demonstrated the simple and much more effective countryside way of getting rid of rubbish. Gauging the wind, he made a huge pile of straw, rotted sacking, and feed bags, and applied a match. Jealous that Marcel had been the first to show us this trick, René had later attempted to clear our 1-acre garden of a decade's worth of scrub by the same method. It had worked well until the wind changed, but thankfully the damage was limited to the loss of his trousers and a new set of garden furniture.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chapter of René and Me, and that you join us again for the next one. See you soon.
René and Me. Written by George East and read by Eugene Fraser.